You ever have one of those neighbors who acts like she owns the whole street? Well, meet Jolene Tafford, our friendly neighborhood HOA president and full-time menace. Short blonde bob, sunglasses even when it's cloudy, and a voice like nails on a chalkboard when she gets going about community standards. She's got this power trip thing going on, and unfortunately, she's got the HOA board eating out of her manicured hand. I'm Kellan Brook. I fix HVAC systems for a living, I pay my dues, I mind my business. I also happen to own the last house on the cul-de-sac, the one where the property line stretches a little beyond the sidewalk and dips into a wooded patch. It's mine, surveyed and recorded. Now, last week, we got hit with one of those classic Midwest snowstorms. I mean, a real dumping. So I hauled my old snowmobile out of the shed and parked it just off my driveway on the edge of the woods. Didn't want it taking up space in the garage, and I figured I'd be using it a lot, clearing trails and helping a few older neighbors get around. Cue Jolene. I was inside sipping coffee when I heard the knock, rapid, angry, impatient. I opened the door and there she was, arms crossed like she was about to fire me from a job I never applied for. "Kellan," she said, her tone already halfway to a threat, "you can't keep that thing on community property." I raised an eyebrow. "It's not, it's on my land." She didn't even blink. "That wooded section is part of the HOA's green belt. It's in the covenants." "No, Jolene, it's not. I've got the plat map in my office. That wedge is mine." She pursed her lips and pulled out her phone. "Then I guess the police can sort it out," and just like that she was calling them. Over a snowmobile. 15 minutes later, a patrol car rolled up. Officer Ramirez stepped out, a solid guy who's been in our town forever. He walked up to me with a look that said, "Seriously?" "Afternoon, Kellan." "Ma'am," he nodded toward Jolene. "Got a call about an unauthorized vehicle?" "Yes," Jolene snapped. "He's storing recreational equipment on HOA land." I didn't say a word, just pointed toward the wooden stake with the neon pink flag that marked the boundary line. Ramirez followed my finger, then pulled out his own notes, probably from the county database. "Looks like you're good, Kellan. This patch is your private property." Jolene's face tightened like she'd bitten a lemon. "That can't be right. The HOA maintains the trees." Ramirez shrugged. "Maybe you do, but it's still his land. He's within his rights to park what he wants there." Jolene turned to me. "You're setting a bad precedent. Others will think they can just store junk wherever they want." "It's a snowmobile, Jolene, and it's not junk. It's also helping your elderly neighbor 2 doors down get her groceries." She didn't respond, just spun on her heel and stormed off like she was late to ruin someone else's day, but that wasn't the end of it. Not even close. Because 2 days later, I found a formal violation notice duct taped to my snowmobile windshield. And this time, Jolene wasn't just annoying. She was breaking the law. The violation notice was printed in red ink, slapped dead center on the windshield of my snowmobile like a scarlet letter. The wording was bureaucratic nonsense, Article 12.4. Prohibited storage of non-standard vehicles on common ground, and it had Jolene's signature at the bottom in loopy cursive, like she was autographically blessing her own power trip. I peeled it off, walked straight into my house, and laid the notice flat on the kitchen table. Then I opened my filing cabinet, pulled out the surveyor's report from when I bought the place 6 years ago, and snapped a photo of both documents side by side. I emailed them to my attorney, Rosalind Sharp. She was a high school classmate turned real estate lawyer with a sharp tongue and a sharper mind. I didn't have to wait long. She called back that afternoon. "Kellan," she said, "let me guess. Your HOA president fancies herself a land baron. She thinks the woods behind my lot are hers. I've already had Officer Ramirez out here. He checked the lot lines and told her to drop it. She didn't. That notice is a formal violation. If she files it with the county, it can affect your title history, and that's not just annoying, it's illegal." "Well," I said. "What now?" "Now," Rosalind replied, "we document everything. I'll draft a cease and desist. In the meantime, install cameras." If she so much as touches that machine again, we'll have her on trespassing, harassment, and filing a fraudulent municipal complaint. That night, I mounted a motion camera on the shed's overhang and angled it toward the snowmobile. The next morning, I added a second one on the tree facing the wooded line. I didn't tell anyone. I wanted raw footage, and boy, did I get it. 2 nights later, around 11, the motion alert pinged my phone. I checked the feed. There she was, Jolene, wearing a puffy white coat and rubber boots, flashlight in one hand, clipboard in the other. She walked right up to the snowmobile and started circling it, writing something down. Then she pulled out a roll of yellow tape and wrapped it around the front bumper like it was a crime scene. She didn't notice the red recording light blinking above her. The next day, I didn't say a word. I printed out stills from the footage, labeled them with time stamps, and added them to the folder I'd started for Roslyn. Then I got to work fixing a furnace 2 blocks over. Around lunchtime, I got a call from my neighbor Daryl, retired firefighter, salt of the earth. "She's going door to door," he said, "telling folks you're storing illegal equipment and threatening the HOA's liability insurance. People are getting spooked." I clenched my jaw. "Did she show proof?" "She's got a stack of those violation letters. I think she printed 20. Told me she'd have to consider fines if this continues." I thanked him and hung up. That afternoon, I walked down to the community mailbox unit and waited. Sure enough, Jolene strutted up 10 minutes later holding a manila envelope. "Afternoon," I said, standing beside the boxes. She gave me a tight-lipped nod and tried to move past me. I stepped sideways, blocking her. "Why are you distributing false violations to my neighbors?" "They're not false," she said, her voice syrupy now. "You're in breach of Article 12.4. "No, I'm not," I said. "My land isn't common ground." "You were told that by a police officer. I have it on camera." She blinked. "You what camera?" I pulled out my phone and showed her a still frame of her wrapping the snowmobile in tape. She stiffened, snatched the envelope tighter to her chest, and turned on her heel. That night, Roslyn filed the cease and desist. 3 pages long, citing trespassing, harassment, defamation, and willful misrepresentation of property boundaries. She sent it certified mail to Jolene's address and copied the entire HOA board. The next morning, I got a call. "Kellan," Roslyn said, "she crossed a line." "What now?" She filed a complaint with the county zoning board. "Claimed you were operating a commercial snowplow service from residential property. That's a felony misrepresentation." I felt my heart rate tick up. "I'm not operating anything. I helped 2 neighbors get out of their driveways." "Doesn't matter." She put it in writing. "I'm forwarding you the scanned document now." The complaint was dated 2 days prior, time-stamped at 9 in the morning, 24 hours after Officer Ramirez told her the land was mine. It accused me of violating zoning codes, engaging in unlicensed motorized transport, and operating a private logistics enterprise from a residential zone. Roslyn got serious. "We need to file a formal grievance with the city attorney." She used her position as HOA president to submit a knowingly false complaint to a government agency. That's municipal fraud. "What happens if we do?" She goes under investigation. "And if they find she used HOA funds to print and distribute those violation letters or mail her complaint, that opens a whole other box." I told her to proceed. 3 days later, the city attorney's office opened an inquiry. They requested HOA financial records, meeting minutes, and any correspondence related to my property. By the end of the week, word had spread. I came home Friday to find 3 of my neighbors on my porch: Daryl, Mrs. Ellison from across the street, and a young couple who just moved in last fall. "She's been doing this to everyone," Mrs. Ellison said. "Last year, she fined me for having non-regulation tulips. She threatened the Alvarezes with foreclosure over a swing set." Daryl nodded. "She fined me for painting my porch without permission. Said the color clashed with community tone. I checked, there's no rule about porch colors." I invited them in. We spent the next 2 hours compiling grievances. Every story came with receipts, emails, letters, pictures of absurd violations. Jolene had fined people for bird feeders, wind chimes, even the brand of mulch in their flower beds. By Monday morning, we had a thick binder labeled HOA overreach, evidence of misconduct. Roslyn helped us draft a formal complaint to the county's HOA Oversight Commission. 2 days later, the bomb dropped. The city attorney's office issued a subpoena for HOA financial records. Turns out, Jolene had been using HOA funds to pay for personal printing services, private courier deliveries, and a $600 research consultant who turned out to be her niece, a college freshman. That was bad enough. But then Roslyn got a call from a paralegal at the county office who'd reviewed the zoning complaint. The listed address for the private logistics enterprise wasn't mine. It was Jolene's. She tried to reroute the accusation through a shell complaint and have it bounce back to me. Fraud, impersonation, and misuse of administrative reporting systems. That wasn't just HOA trouble. That was criminal. Roslyn forwarded the findings to the city prosecutor. Within 48 hours, Jolene was served with a court summons. That evening, I stood on my porch watching the sheriff's deputy knock on her door. A few neighbors had quietly gathered along the sidewalk. No one said a word when she stepped out, still in her gardening gloves, and took the envelope. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. Because now, the whole neighborhood knew. The morning after Jolene got served, her porch was quiet for the first time in weeks. No clipboard in sight. No whispering with board members at the curb. Just a wilted fern swinging in the breeze and a newspaper that had been sitting on her step since dawn. I didn't linger. I had ductwork to repair across town, and I figured I'd let the legal gears grind without my interference. But when I returned that afternoon, something caught my eye. Across the street, a man in a gray blazer and wire-rimmed glasses was photographing Jolene's property from the curb. He had a badge clipped to his belt and a folder tucked under his arm. I crossed the road. "Afternoon," I said. "You with the city?" He turned, professional but not unfriendly. "County Auditor's Office, following up on a report from Zoning and Municipal Finance. You Kellan Brook?" I nodded. He flipped open his folder. "Appreciate the documentation your legal rep submitted. We've got a full investigation underway now." The HOA's financials raised some red flags. "You talking about the consultant payments?" "That and a few other things. There's a pattern of misappropriation. Vendor invoices with no matching services, checks issued to non-registered entities, even a landscaping budget 3 times higher than the actual contract value. Someone's been moving money into phantom accounts." I felt my jaw clench. "You think it's just her?" He closed the folder. "Too early to say, but she signed off on every one of those expenditures, and there's more." We pulled security footage from the community center mailroom, found her shredding documents 2 days before the subpoena hit. That night, Roslyn called again. She's lawyered up. Her attorney filed a motion to dismiss the fraud complaint, claimed the zoning error was a clerical mistake and that the HOA funds were used within discretionary bounds. Will it hold? Not a chance. We've got timestamps, digital trails, and receipts she can't explain. But here's where it turns. The county is considering criminal charges for tampering with public records. I sat down at my dining table, watching the snow outside soften the edges of the trees. She put this whole thing in motion over a snowmobile. She put this whole thing in motion because she assumed no one would push back, Roslyn said, and now she's about to learn what happens when someone does. The next day, an emergency HOA meeting was announced. Flyers were taped to mailboxes. Board update, attendance encouraged. No mention of Jolene. No agenda. Just a time and a place. It was held in the community clubhouse, a beige multipurpose room usually reserved for baby showers and retirement potlucks. By the time I arrived, every folding chair was filled. People stood along the walls. I spotted Darrell near the back. He gave me a silent nod. At the front of the room stood the HOA secretary, a nervous woman named Therese who habitually adjusted her glasses even when they weren't slipping. She tapped the microphone like she was hoping it would break. "Thank you all for coming. As you may have heard, there have been some developments regarding the association's leadership. Effective immediately, Jolene Tafford has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the county investigation." A ripple of murmurs spread across the room. "We understand this is a serious matter," Therese continued. "In the interim, the board has appointed an acting president, Gregory Monroe." An elderly man with a stiff posture and a military haircut stepped up. I recognized him from a few houses down. Widower, kept his truck spotless. He cleared his throat. "I'm not here to sugarcoat anything. The county's reviewing our records and we're cooperating fully. Transparency is our priority moving forward. If you've been fined or penalized unfairly, we want to hear it. We're opening a claims process next week." A hand went up in the second row. "What about the funds she spent?" "The landscaping contract alone. We've already frozen the HOA account," Gregory said. "Our treasurer resigned this morning. We'll be conducting a full audit with a third-party firm." The room was quiet a moment before someone else asked, "And what happens if she's found guilty?" "That'll be up to the courts," he said. "But I'll say this, if she goes down, she won't take this neighborhood with her." After the meeting, a few of us lingered in the parking lot. The mood had shifted. People were angry, yes, but also energized. There was momentum now. Rosalind called again that night. "She's panicking. Her attorney just offered to settle and resign if we drop the civil suit." "Not happening," I said. "This isn't about money anymore. And it won't be. The county prosecutor's office is moving ahead with charges anyway, but here's the kicker." "What?" "There's a second investigation. The HOA's insurance carrier filed a fraud report. Turns out Jolene filed a claim last year for storm damage to the community fence. Collected over $20,000 to replace it. Fence was never replaced." "Exactly. They sent an inspector, no record of any work." "And guess who signed the disbursement check?" I didn't need her to say it. "That weekend, I replaced the motion camera batteries. Snow kept falling and I figured Jolene might try something desperate, but she didn't leave her house. Lights stayed off, curtains drawn. On Monday, a squad car pulled into her driveway. 2 officers stepped out. This time they didn't knock. They had a warrant. I kept my distance, but I watched from my porch as they entered the home and emerged 20 minutes later with 2 boxes of documents and a laptop bag. No one clapped. No one cheered, but every porch light on the street flickered on one by one like a chain reaction. The next week, Gregory called a second meeting. This one was shorter. "We've contacted a property law consultant," he said. "We're rewriting the bylaws, no more vague clauses. No more open-ended fines. Every rule will require a community vote and every expenditure will be published." He turned to me from the podium. "Kellan Brook has agreed to assist us with the transition. His documentation and persistence helped uncover violations that affected many of you. We owe him our thanks." I didn't say much, just nodded and excused myself before the applause started. The snowmobile stayed where it was, untouched. A few neighbors even asked if I could help them with their own winter access. Jolene. She was indicted on 5 felony counts: falsifying government documents, misappropriation of HOA funds, insurance fraud, tampering with public records, and obstruction. Her trial date was set for mid-spring. The community, it bounced back. Stronger, sharper, and finally free from the chokehold of someone who'd mistaken a title for a throne. And me, I went back to work, fixed heating systems, replaced vents, took on a few extra jobs when the weather got rough. But every time I passed that wooded patch near my driveway, I smiled just a little. Not because I'd won, but because I'd reminded everyone that a title doesn't give you power. What gives you power is knowing your rights and refusing to be quiet when someone tries to take them. The trial date was still a few weeks out, but the neighborhood had already begun to reshape itself. With the HOA board under temporary supervision and the bylaws frozen for review, things were finally Sane. No more petty notices. No more gossip-filled walks of shame from mailboxes. For the first time since I moved in, I could take my coffee outside without feeling like I was being watched through binoculars. But the thing about people like Jolene, they don't go quietly. And just when it felt like the dust had settled, she pulled one last move, one so brazen and reckless it nearly undid everything. It started with a knock on my door just after noon on a Thursday. Not a hard rap like Jolene used to do, this one was cautious. I opened the door to find Gregory Monroe standing there, holding a weathered cardboard box and wearing a look that told me I wasn't going to like what I was about to hear. "She's trying to burn the place down on her way out," he said, stepping inside and setting the box on my kitchen table. "What's this?" I asked, lifting the lid. Inside were dozens of HOA documents, contracts, receipts, checks, and internal emails. Some were torn at the edges, some coffee-stained, but all legible. They weren't supposed to exist. A lot of them had been reported missing during the audit. "She stashed these in a maintenance storage unit the HOA leases behind the tennis courts," Gregory said. "One of the board volunteers found the key in a drawer under her name." I pulled out a paper near the top, an invoice for a tree removal service dated 2 years ago. It claimed the HOA paid over $9,000 to Renshaw Arbor and Landscape Services. I knew that name didn't exist. The company listed an address that turned out to be a vacant lot outside of town. "She created fake contractors," I said, "and paid herself." Gregory nodded. "Looks like it. We're going through the files now, but there's more. Take a look at this." He handed me a folded letter. It was addressed to the HOA insurance carrier and signed in Jolene's name. The letter claimed that several residents, my name included, had threatened vandalism and posed an ongoing risk to community property. It requested a policy increase and included a fake police report number at the bottom. "She faked a police incident?" I asked, stunned. "That's what it looks like." I grabbed my phone and called Rosalind. She didn't answer, but I left a message explaining what we'd found. 15 minutes later, she called back and told me to keep the documents sealed and untouched. She was on her way. By the time she arrived, Gregory had already returned to the clubhouse with the rest of the box. Rosalind brought someone with her, a man in a dark blazer who introduced himself as Detective Heller from the county's Financial Crimes Division. "I've been following the case since the municipal complaint," Heller said, setting his folder on the table. "If what you're telling me is in that box, this just turned into something a lot bigger." He pulled out a notepad and flipped to a page filled with names, dates, and numbers. "Jolene Tafford is currently out on bail under pretrial conditions," he said. "But forging a police report and submitting it to an insurance company, that's a whole new felony. And if she used HOA funds to pay the premiums under false pretenses, we're looking at wire fraud too." Rosalind looked at me. "We need to establish a timeline. If she submitted that letter while under investigation, it shows intent to defraud during an active legal process." Heller nodded. "Which could lead to obstruction charges." We all headed to the clubhouse. Gregory had already called an emergency board session, and by the time we got there, 2 more detectives were collecting the rest of the documents. One of them had already flagged 3 more fake contractor companies, all linked to the same P.O. box. The fallout was swift. The next day, Jolene's bail was revoked. She was picked up at her sister's house 20 miles away and remanded in custody pending trial. The media caught wind of it, and by the end of the week, our quiet cul-de-sac had a local news van parked at the entrance. I stayed out of the spotlight. Let Gregory and Rosalind handle the questions, but I kept my ear to the ground and my eyes open. 2 weeks later, the trial started. I was called in as a witness on the second day, mostly to verify the property boundaries and the original zoning complaint. I brought the surveyor's report, the footage of her trespassing, and the letter she'd taped to my snowmobile. The prosecutor asked me one question that stuck with me. "Mr. Brook, at any point did you threaten Miss Tafford, damage HOA property, or operate a commercial service from your residence?" "No," I said. I cleared snow for neighbors and parked on my own land. The defense tried to rattle me, suggested I had a personal grudge, even hinted that I'd provoked her. The judge shut it down. By the end of the week, Jolene was found guilty on 7 counts: fraud, forgery, misappropriation of funds, tampering with public records, and obstruction. She was sentenced to 5 years with eligibility for parole after 3. The judge made a point to say that her role as HOA president carried a heightened duty of trust that she had exploited for personal gain. She didn't look at me once during sentencing. Afterward, the neighborhood transformed more than I expected. Gregory was elected as the permanent HOA president in a special vote. The board was expanded to include volunteers from every corner of the subdivision, and Roslyn was hired as an independent compliance advisor. They introduced a new rule. No enforcement action could be taken without a 2/3 vote and documented evidence. People started opening up. The Alvarezes installed a new swing set. Darryl finally painted his porch the blue he'd wanted for years. Mrs. Ellison planted whatever tulips she wanted, no approval required. And me? I moved the snowmobile into the woodshed in early spring once the thaw came. Didn't need it anymore, but I kept it tuned just in case. One afternoon, as I was repairing a duct system for the new neighbors on Birch Hollow Lane, Gregory called me. "Got something you might want to see," he said. "Swing by the clubhouse when you're done." I arrived to find him standing beside a new bulletin board mounted in the lobby. The top read Community Hall of Contributions. There in the center was a framed copy of the original plat map of my property, the one that started everything. Below it, a small plaque. "In recognition of Kellan Brook for standing up, speaking out, and reminding us that community is built on accountability." I didn't say anything, just stared at it for a moment. "Never thought I'd be a plaque kind of guy," I muttered. Gregory chuckled. "You didn't ask to be. But you earned it." That evening, I sat out on the porch with a cold drink, watching kids ride their bikes down the street. No one glanced nervously at their flower beds. No one whispered about fines. The neighborhood felt normal again, and as I leaned back in my chair, I realized something. Sometimes it doesn't take a revolution to fix a broken system. Sometimes all it takes is one man, a snowmobile, and the courage to say, "That's enough."